Hi, I'm Delisi.
And I'm Chef James Rigato.
And in this episode of Essential Cooking, we speak with Chef Andrew Carmellini, a restaurateur and James Beard Foundation two-time awardee. We talk about the ways in which the restaurant industry has changed in Carmellini's 32 years as a chef and about the future of the cooking profession. But before we got to any of that, we had an impromptu conversation about his time on Iron Chef, and that was how our interview started.
And I did Iron Chef the very first year and did not like that.
Who'd you go against?
Mario. And we wiped his ass off the floor, but they had the producer came down and changed their score.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
What do you mean?
No, this is not a surprise.
He came down from because they're basically like they're like, it could be one of three ingredients, right? And so in our case, it was Parmesan, leeks, and cauliflower. So we were like, it's probably gonna be Parmesan, right? Because like battle leek isn't like the sexiest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like okay, like 4 people would like find that cool, But so we actually practiced all 3. We did 3 different menus.
Oh, okay.
Just to kind of like, and so we get there in the morning time and like there's like, it's still like, to try to like sort of like fool you, there's like 3 different pile of ingredients, right? And it's like there's this huge pile of leeks and like a thing of tomatoes, and then there's like a bunch of cauliflower with like one thing, and then there's like all the stuff you're actually going to use, It's like, okay, it's Parmesan. And then like the Iron Chef guy, like that was Mario, they have like first of all they were, that's what they were. They were like, my menu, the ingredient list I sent them, I said, well, it's middle of white truffle season. I have Parmesan. I want white truffles. They're like, we can't do it. It's not in the show budget. I was like, how about if I bring them? And their answer was, it won't be fair to the Iron Chef. So the thing starts, we start rolling, and then I knew this was going to happen. I said it was going to happen. They were like, Iron Chef Mario Batali just took out the hugest white truffle you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I almost pulled like a Bobby Flay and just like stopped
jumped
on
your cutting board.
I was like 2 seconds from doing that, and I was like, keep it classy, Carmellini. Like,
Yeah. Well, that was like
just show them what you got.
that was also like controversial at the time. I feel like it was pre-Instagram, social media days, but like Bobby Flay stood on his cutting board in the Japanese show. I think it was the Japanese Iron Chef. And it was very controversial. It's very disrespectful.
Wait, have we started? Because this is great right now.
Oh, yeah. It's
recording. You're recording.
All right, good.
Yeah. But do you remember? I mean, I know you remember. You probably don't know this, and this is early. I mean, maybe you do. I don't want to take it away. You might have been following Bobby Flay then, but that was kind of what gave him this like bad boy Bobby rumor, I guess. I mean, I think he's.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
But
I don't
did
know.
watch Iron Chef. I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, But what year would that have been?
I'll tell you exactly what year this was 2007.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Listen, the original Japanese one was amazing. It was like, I used to watch it all the time.
It was so amazing.
And even like the first couple ones they did in years were pretty good because they had some really good chef de cuisines on, so it was actually, but then, once when we did ours and then it aired, I was like, what the hell is this? Like,
yeah.
Well,
I was like, because I'm
anything Morimoto too. I mean, I feel like that. I mean, obviously all the chefs were great that were on there, but anything Morimoto. I mean, just watching that guy, busting out ice sculptures in the middle, to like cold smoke things. You're like, what is this? Yeah. That was some of the best. I mean, that to me was like the heyday of like food television. Was anything Morimoto live?
Yeah, those were good. It's food culture generally is pretty horrible right now.
Why do you say that?
I don't want to sound like the old guy in the room, but it's like food wasn't cool when I was a kid, and no one was really talking about it. When I graduated from high school in 1989, and I told people what I was doing, and I went to Catholic college prep school, so I was like, yeah, I'm moving to New York, and I'm going to go to cooking school. I'm going to go work at a 4-star French restaurant, and it might as well have said that I was going to be like going to the priesthood or like going to the military, right? It was like no one. It was just the restaurants were just a place for like drug addicts and sexual deviants, media's changed. It changed a lot. There was this heyday, and I look back of like I would say American gastronomy that started in the late '80s, but it was really only in New York. One restaurant in Chicago, maybe one or two in California, where it really was kind of about food culture and enjoying food and, the kind of at the table and the history of that and celebrating what we have in America. And then it got ridiculous. I would call it like 2005. It became kind of like hair bands in 1991. You could feel that like this was not going to last, because like chefs were everywhere and there were a lot of like people that were calling themselves chefs that were never even worked in kitchens. And, there was a lot of dopes on TV, some of them that worked for me that couldn't do anything. They were on TV and they were like pretending they were trying to get on, trying to get on TV. And it was just like this circle of like what the profession was. And when really the profession, it's a very blue collar trade oriented job, you know what I mean? And it wasn't, and can you imagine I don't know when Food Network started, what year that was, 90 whatever.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they started the Plumber Network and they went out and they found like the 10 most good-looking,
it's kind of
charismatic,
HGTV.
talented plumbers, and then said, okay, we're going to each give you shows, okay, and we're going to have to do 24-hour programming, and and they're going to show this like this cool trade you have. So you go from like plumber guy to like someone's on TV and then everyone knows who you are. How do you think you're going to behave? How do you think you're going to like, what do you think is going to actually happen? And it all happened.
I think too, there's a lot of excitement from like the actual producers of culinary content when you get 7 million viewers or an Emmy nomination. And then you're like, okay. And then other people follow. Now you got to go find chefs. So if like, you start digging, you start mining. It's not when you strike gold, great, but then now you're panning gold on the side of the river. Just any little nugget, you'll take it and you'll run with it. I think that's the bigger problem nowadays is that there's food content on every single streaming service. You name it, you can find the food content. Then there's certainly not that many incredibly disciplined, talented people to fill every single episode of every single show.
Yeah, and
so you end up with a lot of fluff.
Well, yeah, this is the same in many kind of different disciplines, is that virtuosity does not sell tickets. Okay. Yeah. So, and that's kind of what it is, right?
I was just in Japan and like almost every single food stall is something special. And, you could just as a student of food, every time I ate was like an education. And yet like, it's not, I don't know if it would make great TV.
I think about that with whatever profession. Like the hard work of it is not very sexy when it comes to anything. And so TV glamorizes things. And the perception, I think, from people who consume food and people who think they want to make food for a living, it becomes very unrealistic and skewed.
Well, it's a little bit the kind of pandemic aside. Obviously like a big thing in this, but it's a little bit, some of the, I would say, staffing issues that the business has right now is that you basically had this arc, since we're talking about it, you had this arc where no one was in the profession as far as, and historically, like in I think it was 76, 75, please don't quote me on that, the Department of Labor changed its classification for chefs from being a domestic to a professional category. And that was a huge thing that had changed with the unions and changed kind of like in hotel structure. And so then you went into the 80s with what started happening in restaurants when you had, students, young people that went to Europe and kind of bring that back. And then you had, this glamorization, over fetishization and over glamorization of this stuff that happened in, the night, which was great for the business and great for the profession, right? Because it legitimized the role. Then you had a lot of, people realizing that either they were more like white collar kids going into the job,
the blue collar job,
going to this job, thinking because there was, all this media attention around it, and all of a sudden there's like TV shows, and then like, oh, guys with tattoos are doing this stuff, and like women are doing this stuff, and it's like became much more broader than the kind of job was before. But the job is still the job. The work is still the work. It's never not going to be the work until there are robots.
How much money are you investing in robots right now?
I'm all about it.
I mean, you have 15 restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of joking, but also, and I think that's a good segue into the fact of like, you're here, we're talking casually about cooking, but I mean,
Sure.
You're running an empire. I mean, you have, how many restaurants do you have now? 15?
20.
You have 20 restaurants, and it doesn't sound like you're stopping. So all of these, touch points of like the industry and the changes, I mean, like you're dealing with it on a 20 scale. I mean, I have one restaurant, and I mean, when you seriously think about the workforce moving forward, post-pandemic, I mean, you're thinking about robots? Is that?
I'm being much more careful about what we're saying yes to.
Yeah.
Because it's just there's been a lot of things that have happened that have kind of like changed it, and there's no blaming like one thing. It's a social construct, right? Because of things out of our control.
Totally.
I will say though, what I was saying before is that kind of like media arc, and I say, that has to do with print, magazine, TV, and everything from when it was basically just Gourmet Magazine and Cooks in 1988 or whatever, and then to, peak 2005, call it. There's a good amount of people that went into the business, like, the business is the business, you still have to close, you have to take out the trash, you have to order, you have to like run HR, you have to like, you do have to not lose money all the time. You have to, besides the art of cooking, right? The art of cooking and the business, that's the fun part, right? And if you can get to do that 25% of the time, then that's pretty good, But all the other stuff has to kind of support it. So I think there was a lot of attrition and getting closer to pandemic, and then pandemic just lit a fuse on that for probably a lot of industries, right? But we're still rolling. We have great teams, and we have people would kill for what our group and our teams we have around us. And
do you get to cook that much?
I make schedule myself to do that. Meaning like we're doing a podcast now, but we'll do if it's menu development, new product development. If it's just kind of, I actually have on my calendar next Wednesday. I can tell you what it says because I wrote it. I wrote it today. It says Blood and Guts at Lafayette. Blood and Guts is my Lafayette's our French brasserie, and that's means that I'm going to go in and cook some tripe and sweetbreads and kind of like those kind of like dishes with that, and we might because during the winter we'll put one or two of those kind of like classic dishes on the menu, or run them as specials a little bit. But I want to go in and do them.
Is that something that's already listed right now, like it's already promoted, it's happening? Or is it just like a night of, you just announce it?
No, that's just something I put in my calendar to make sure that I don't have anything to do after like 1 o'clock. I'm going to go in, put on whites, and make some tripe and some sweetbreads.
Gotcha.
And like,
so that's almost more for you than it is for anybody else.
It's not an event. It's just kind of like
it's just what you're going to do.
Scheduled. Yeah. So it just depends. Every day is different, really. Mm-hmm. We don't do so many event-y things, and these days. But it's just really concentrating on the restaurants, concentrating on the teams, customers.
No, you're in New York. You're obviously here in Detroit.
Yeah.
At San Morello, fantastic place. I feel like I've eaten at most of the offerings you have there. And then where are you? In Nashville? Where are you heading?
We opened in 2 restaurants in Nashville this year.
Okay.
In a W hotel there, and then but I'm mostly concentrating on New York. Our things after that are in New York the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Because we're mostly downtown Manhattan. Me and my 2 partners, we live in Soho, in Chelsea. We walk to all the restaurants, but we maybe look to do some other things in New York. Yeah.
Has running a restaurant in New York, if you look at the last, obviously, what is this, 25 years you've been cooking in New York? Like
30
actually, years?
Yeah.
Is running a restaurant harder nowadays than it was, or is it easier? Is it both? Because obviously you have more resources. You have, it's a global economy. You can get things flown to you.
Oh, as opposed to like in Detroit.
I think no, in New York is it easier now than it was then, or is it hard now? Because
well, there are. It's hard to say because I mean New York's a very different place. There's neighborhoods that didn't have a lot of activity now have a lot of activity, meaning like Williamsburg was a Polish and Italian neighborhood on the other side of the river, and now it's hotels and busy and restaurants and all different kind of stuff. So there's a lot more restaurants. I would say when I moved to New York in 91, if you wanted caviar, porcini, sea urchin, stuff like that, there were certain restaurants you went to for that type of thing, right? You went to, and you mostly had a LE or a LA in front of them. You went to Le Cirque, you went to La Pavillon, you went to that's where you went. And there was one Italian restaurant, San Domenico, where I was working. Like when I say one Italian restaurant, I mean like higher end Italian restaurant. Now you can go to a wine bar in Fort Greene in Brooklyn and, get some pretty nice sea urchin, and it's not just like super high, which is still a little strange to me in a way. Like a place like La Conda Verde, which is, I would call like a mid-level Italian, super busy, boisterous. Yeah, you would never, you wouldn't have seen 30 years ago like porcini on that menu.
Right.
But we'll bring in like West Coast porcini and we'll do a pasta dish with it and we can sell it for $50 and people will buy it.
Yeah, I think
a lot of people will buy it.
That's kind of one of the interesting byproducts of some of the groaning about food media being out of control is also like you have a really dynamic, educated audience now that knows it's porcini time and they'll go out and spend the money. And I think at least in the
it's
Midwest,
also and that's again then if you were serious about food or you wanted to wanted to be a better chef, it was only like New York was the only place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a couple places in Chicago, like one or two places in San Francisco, in the States. And if you wanted to go to school, there was only like two places to go if you were serious. Now there's almost in every major and secondary and third market, there's like some pretty good chefs around, like having like pretty good restaurants, and like there's a cool kid everywhere fermenting something, or and they can. So you don't, if you're like a young person that's interested in this work, you don't necessarily need to go to New York. I tell people they should go to Asia and Europe for sure, just to like culturally understand. It's not so important these days to go and stage, I don't think, especially if you're working at a couple of good restaurants in the States. If you want to, and you can, amazing experience for sure.
Right.
But, before you like have a reference on how to make gnocchi, just because the cool restaurant you worked wherever, New York or Detroit or Miami were like made gnocchi, doesn't necessarily give you the full context to understand what it is. And you probably should like go to Emilia Romagna and Southern Lombardy and like eat some gnocchi, so you know where it comes from, understand the topography, understand how it smells there, like what's the why I shouldn't do certain things with it.
Right.
The same thing if you're going to make a spring roll, or you shouldn't open up a Vietnamese restaurant unless you at least go to Vietnam and understand just culturally between the food in the north, the food in the south,
right,
what the city food's like, what the country food's like.
I think even obviously it's interesting because you have a Detroit restaurants and you have New York restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
To me, one thing that I talk to my staff a lot about is like Midwest is wonderful for a million reasons, but one of the things is we don't have the diversity of restaurants or even food scenes or even cultures represented via restaurants. So you're educating your diners on certain techniques and dishes and ingredients relatively frequently. Whereas I think the perk of New York, that from my perspective, is like you have a demographic in the dining scene that understands cuisine, flavors, dishes. You can get away with a lot of. I noticed that when I was younger, meeting chefs from New York or cooking against them, Top Chef, et cetera,
sure,
was they understand like, oh, this is Burmese. Oh, this is this is a Southeast Asian flavor specifically. This is something you'll find more in South, America. Like there's things where I had to be like, wait a second, where is this again? And I needed to research more ingredients because I'm just not exposed to them here. I think I didn't know what yuzu kosher was until I was like 30.
Right.
Now you see it on, pop-ups from a 19-year-old kid. So I think that it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. It's like New York has such a great food scene, so therefore it births even better.
Yeah.
cooks
I mean, in
and
LA,
chefs.
has a great food scene also. It's expanded a lot also, and a lot, not just high-end food, right? So yeah, if you're exposed to that, it's very different, depth than like New York has, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, it's like you think about your Mexican cuisine or your Korean cuisine. Like,
sure.
You grow up with a real understanding of it.
Yeah, I grew up in Cleveland, so
Similar situation to here.
we got nothing. we got pierogies.
Well, Angie from Don Angie's from Cleveland too.
We got pierogies. That's what we got.
You been to Don Angie?
Yeah.
They do a great job. They're producing great Italian chefs out of Cleveland. Is that a thing now?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that I became a great Italian chef, but I left. I left when I was 18. So
some would say that. Maybe Cleveland's not responsible for it, but they birthed you.
But no, I like being in Detroit. It's very because it's very different. There's a good spirit here. Even though my first real chef I worked for is only like an hour and a half from here. He's in Vermillion, Ohio, and so I started cooking when I was 14. I started washing dishes when I was 14, and then did what everyone else did, and all of a sudden I'm on the line, and then I went to go work for my first real chef who's got a restaurant in Vermillion, Ohio called Chez Francois, and he was getting his fish from Brown Trading. This is 1987, 7. He was Lee Jones's first customer, celebrity farmer or whatever. Because Hudson is the next town over, and so before they started shipping everything, he was selling to local restaurants.
No kidding, that's a fun fact.
That's why Lee's got a bean named after me, because we were one of his first customers when I was a kid. That's
Chef's Garden.
Yeah,
it's like the boutique vegetable guy.
He was a soybean farmer in Hudson, Ohio, that started to do farmer markets, but started to do boutique vegetable type stuff, and then they really amped up and they started shipping. Interesting enough, his big market is China now.
I was gonna say he's international. I mean, they ship internationally a lot.
Yeah.
I mean that Erie, cool. That Erie soil field, that Lake Erie is. I mean, it's pretty impressive. You go down there and all their hoop houses. It's a beautiful operation. I feel like more people should go down there, even if you're from Michigan. If you're not even a chef, you should go see.
Yeah, you pay for it obviously. So a lot of his customers, they're he's the Intercontinental Hong Kong and Mandarin Oriental and everything. But the best white asparagus in my life I've ever had, even better than I love the French thick ones from the Landes and all that, but his white asparagus that they do there is spectacular. We use it all the time.
Yeah.
When it comes into season, really, really sweet. You can also use all of it. It doesn't get string in the end. I don't know what their secret is, but it's really good.
Yeah, Andy's such a sweet guy.
Yeah,
they do a lot of dinners down there. You should look it up,
cool.
Ann. And anybody else that's listening, they do guest facing dinners, with featuring chefs from around the country. It's a really cool Chef's Garden here in Ohio.
Yeah.
But
it's exciting to hear you guys get excited still about food. To say that's my favorite thing. When you do so much of it and taste so many things, would you guys, so you've been doing this a little bit longer than you've been doing this. Whenever I talk to musicians, I always ask them if they wish they had been born in a different period of time in relation to music. And I wonder if that applies to food. It was certainly a different time when you started than it is now. Different time when you started than when he started. I think about food and what food would have been like before you, 20 years before, 30 years before you decided to become a chef. And would that have been an interesting time or not so much to make food and to be creative with food? I just get curious about what that looked like and what that would feel like.
Well, I mean, even though we started this conversation kind of almost complaining a little bit, or just not complaining. I guess having
bemoaning something.
No, having a more seasoned outlook on the current.
Nicely done.
That's not complaining at all, because the food part. It just to touch on the first thing is the food part, and I tell that to some of my younger cooks and like sous chefs. So it's like, if you still don't love the work part, there are a lot other. There's like easier ways to like, I've heard, to like make a living, right? People do this influence thing. They make videos. They like this thing coding stuff. I don't know. I've heard there are other ways, right? So, if you don't love the work, yeah, you should definitely go do something else, for sure. But to answer the other question, which is interesting, it's probably the most glorious time for restaurants and like food culture. I think probably from late '80s to mid 2000s for sure, because there was basically went from 0 to 100, which is a relatively short period of time. You know, my Uncle Tilio used to bring back arugula seeds every year from Friuli. My family's from Friuli, Italy, and there was no arugula in South Cleveland or like in when we were kids. And he would bring back seeds because you couldn't even get them. There was like they wouldn't sell them, so we would like quote unquote smuggle the real arugula back every year, and we would have like the arugula. So that's like, I don't know, 1979. Now you can get it like not even Whole Foods. I'm talking about like I don't know, Key Foods, or I don't know what the like Aldi. Aldi. You can get arugula. So even at a product level, it's like come so far, in this. Isn't it? Because it's come so far in some ways, and then in some ways it hasn't. But it really has like evolved, a lot. And now with social, it's like it's evolved even further, for better or worse. So I don't know. I mean, even though we started with this kind of like seasoned outlook culturally where we are, it's been a glorious time for food culture, I think. Even though it's very fun, it's weird now.
Well, it's taken on a lot of changes, but in terms of the access to food, like the arugula, there's no access to it here.
Sure.
The access to food has changed a lot in the last 40 years, and you were working through that whole thing, so you worked through that whole evolution, really.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
I think you do kind of represent a great like historical moment in food, because you're kind of like, pre-Food Network, like your career. I mean, before these legendary chefs like Daniel. I mean, who you obviously worked for when he. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Daniel wasn't a restaurant then, right?
Oh no, yeah, they had. Danielle was a restaurant. Yeah, I worked for Danielle when he hired me to be the chef at Café Bleu.
Okay, gotcha. Because where did he get his start?
Oh, he was at Le Cirque.
Le Cirque.
But I was an executive sous chef for 2 years at Le Cirque, but it was after he was there.
Daniel. Okay,
yeah.
But to like watch
the timelines,
to watch some of these like legends come into their own pre social media, pre Food Network, but then also like you said, you're on Iron Chef. You're also. I feel like you benefited from these, changes that came out, but you also got the benefit from the beginning. You got the benefit from them not being victim to them early in your career. Like nowadays, if you're from Midland, Michigan, you go on the internet, you can watch what Rene Redzepi's doing, and you can literally buy a ticket and go fly out and stage there. Like, I had to I remember I was like reading Larousse Gastronomique in high school, and then I would get one used Charlie Trotter cookbook and like wouldn't even understand what was going on in it.
When I lived in Italy and worked in Italy for a year, and I also lived and worked in France for a year, and in the 90s, and 2 separate times, and I have my faxes that I hand wrote in Italian and then in French to try to get stashes.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Because
they were stashes.
Yeah, they were faxes back. So I have faxes back from Michel Bras and faxes back from Alain Broussard and faxes and I had to learn how to write French and learn how to write Italian to do it, because there was no translator or whatever. So I took Italian.
Yeah.
And then to go like live and work there, and then Yeah, it's pretty
Did you
wild.
stage at Michelle Bras?
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually I did not know that. That's one. How was that?
Yeah. It was cool. I was only there for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I mostly worked at our Page and then a kind of a bistro in Nice. But I did some like stages here and there to kind of pepper it around.
That's pretty cool. Now, when you do a stage like that, is that something where you're like the hype going in is so huge that you're just there and you're just kind of doing some kitchen work and then you leave and you're kind of like, is that like
every experience is different, like there's I don't. It's actually interesting that we're having this conversation because I was just in France a couple weeks ago, and I was in Italy in June. And the Italy trip, I brought 6 of my chefs to Italy for 10 days. So you should come and work for me. Come and work for Andrew Carmellini.
You go to Italy every day for 10 days.
Yeah. We were 7 of us. I brought some my Josh Nidell's our beverage director. He's a master somm. He came to. Brought my service director and then a bunch of chefs. And but we flew to Nice and we kicked off our 10 days at Louis Quinze, which is Alain Ducasse's flagship in Monaco. And I'm a spoiled jerk, so I've been there like 3 or 4 times already. So anyways, previously, that was a restaurant where it was impossible to even go work there for free. They wouldn't even want to talk to you. I was able to do it because I was working in this place in Nice and I had a connection and they wouldn't even want to talk to you. I tried working at Girardet in Switzerland, which is now is Hotel de Ville, and Frank Giovanni is the chef there. Arguably the best restaurant in the world. I know Noma is often said to be, but I think Crissier actually is. And anyways, yeah, I remember going there and they wouldn't even like open the door. They were like, no.
Really?
Sorry. Yeah. So this is like didn't even want to talk to you.
Well, for a number of reasons. One being you're American.
Being American, yeah. Anyways, so we're having lunch at Ducasse, which is spectacular, and I know the pastry chef there, Sandro McKilly, and we went in the kitchen afterwards just to say hi, and they were amazing, so nice and everything. And the first words out of his mouth was, "Do you know anyone that wants to work?"
Oh my gosh.
So they're having problems in France also.
But that's a sobering moment in your career to be like, look at this.
Yeah, and I have a friend in Japan who's got a couple of restaurants outside Tokyo or in Tokyo, and they're having the same problem there too. So it really is a worldwide kind of. I mean, worldwide. I don't know if it's.
I think it's fair. I think you could say worldwide.
I think it's we'll call it first world problem.
Black perspectives haven't always been centered in the telling of America's story. Now, we're taking center stage. Introducing NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of Black-led stories from NPR's podcasts. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
This is such a maybe cliche question, but I have to ask both of you. I think you and I have talked about this before, but some people say that there was a meal that they will never forget because it was so spectacular, and maybe it was the time in their life or what was going on or what it was or whatever. Do you guys have a meal that you'll never forget and how you felt about it?
Do you want to say like restaurant meal, or do you? It's completely open.
It's a completely open question.
I feel like you're in a restaurant. Our minds are in restaurant land right now.
Okay, I guess you can stay there. We can say restaurant and then non-restaurant meal.
I mean, for me, it was like it's a battle of like firsts, right? Because like your first. Incredibly, if you're young enough and you're getting a tasting menu at the right age, it's a formative experience. Mm-hmm. There's only and then every now and then you have such a great tasting menu that it's like newly formative because maybe it lines up with where you want to be or where you're at or what you're thinking about. But I mean, I ate at Charlie Trotter's I think I was like 21, and that was like the first time I had some of those experiences. And then he does the tour and he appears out of nowhere, and the servers know everything about. And it's I mean, Trotter's is definitely and to me, it was like a Midwest restaurant, so it was like that was a tangible experience. Right. It wasn't like you're in some faraway land. So yeah, for me, it was Trotter's in in the early 2000s, and that was food was obviously wonderful, but it was, I think, like, I mean, John Shields was there at the time, and you know, Matthias and Bill Kim. I mean, he had a legendary lineup of Sues and CDCs and such. But yeah, so for me, that was the formative experience of like, wait a second, you can get away with this in the Midwest.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes the best meals aren't in restaurants, right? You know, they're kind of like
your grandma, you know.
So many other things like but you know, because we are keeping our restaurants, and it is interesting what you said about like having something a little bit younger in your career where you become like more informed later or less jaded, or kind of like, you know, something becomes old hat, or you've seen a lot of things a lot of times, so it kind of you know, it's such a funny question, right? Again, excuse me because I'm a spoiled jerk, but I don't know. You know, there's a restaurant because there could be a couple, you know, answers to this, but there was I was catering a wedding for a very good friend of mine in Italy because a couple times I've done that for friends, and doing this wedding, and Faith Willinger is I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a food writer in Italy who was one of the first Americans. She married an Italian guy, and she lives in Florence, and she's probably the most connected out of anybody to the true like ecosystem in Italy. Knows all the makers, all the chefs, all the wine. Like she's introduced a lot of those people to like the broader world. And she calls me when I'm there, and she's like, "Hey, I hear you here." You know, and I was like, "Yeah." And you know, she goes, "What are you doing tomorrow night?" I was like, "Well, I'm getting ready for this wedding on Saturday." It was like Thursday. She goes, or no, it was Wednesday. She goes, "No, you're not. You're coming with us." And I was like, "I can't." She goes, "You have to come with us." She goes, it's going to be a great night. So she tells me where it is. It's like 3 hours away. I'm like, you know, it sounds like I should go. So me and my wife jump in the car. We're like, we leave at like 3, and we get to Fontanella, Emilia Romagna, which is outside Parma, and there's a restaurant there called Osteria Divan. And we had, and she arranged this dinner at this place with R.W. Apple, who was a very famous writer from the Times, kind of like a Walter Cronkite type of character. So 60s through, this is, I don't know, 2002 kind of like era kind of guy, but a huge gourmand, traveled all over the world, excellent writer. And there was some Italian winemakers. It was a cast of characters. And it was just, the meal started at 8, and we probably finished up at 2:30. And this guy who has this restaurant, and his wife's an amazing cook. She definitely stays in the kitchen, and he is a character for sure. And again, so connected in like layers that you'll never like hit in Italy. And so he has a crazy wine cellar and food spectacular with a lot of things that you normally wouldn't see on menus. And it's a company plus wines that you'll never drink, plus this kind of like very layered. It was amazing evening.
And
also
probably the pressure of like knowing you have to cater this wedding. You're like you're doing Russian roulette a little bit.
And I drove home after.
Yeah.
So it was like, we left after that. We drove back 3 hours.
There's a danger. There's that's the missing element that you can't get at just any old meal.
Definitely.
You're risking a failed wedding catering job.
Yeah, in another country for 120 people.
Yeah.
But spectacular evening, and him and I we're still friends.
What did you
all these years later. And I have actually Carne Mare, which is opened up this a kind of Italian chop house thing last year, and I have a dish on there that's named after him because it's like. We go every year. I always bring people to go because it's not any list. It's not on any it's not in Michelin. It's not on like anyone's celebrity list or whatever.
That's the best.
And they're so passionate about what they do, and amazing place, Osteria Divan.
Was there anything? What did you eat like that?
Yeah,
was there any singular bites that were you're like, this is anything you steal?
They always kind of do different things all the time, but there's some specialties there in that kind of like region. It's called the Bassa, which is like outside of Parma, where the Po River kind of goes towards the Adriatic, and it's farmland and very flat. But it's right next to the DOP for Parmigiano Reggiano. And they have these kind of like little scarti scraps of Parmesan cheese curds. So when they cut the cheese to put it inside the mold, they kind of like cut these curds off and they kind of just fry them. No. It's basically fried cheese curd, but it's fried Parmesan cheese curds. Yeah. And they put like, chestnut honey on it or whatever. And I don't know. You don't get that anywhere else,
no,
right?
That's a great answer. Because that's something you can't.
So it's something you can totally.
You can't put that on your menu.
Yeah, you can't.
That's and well, I kind of want to because I feel like this could be a 5-hour podcast if we were to start. I mean, this is romantic. I'm like, I want to go to Italy so bad right now. Now
you're also making me nostalgic for Trotters because I had some.
I'm sure you had epic meals there. Everyone did.
I had some experience. Yeah, I staged there in 91.
Now, did you positive experience?
Well, yeah, he, they were basically like, then they were the idea of like master American chefs was a very new concept then. You basically had David Bouley, who just got 4 stars from the New York Times, the first American to ever get it, and Trotter, right, who kind of was just coming into this, again, with this kind of media wave of like these guys are doing this thing.
And not a traditional path at all.
So there was 2 kind of exciting times, and I was sort of like working for free at Bouley, and I wanted to go, check out Trotter, and that was exciting. So it answers the question before. It's like, that was the start of this time for American gastronomy, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I traveled in my young 20s, did some stage, nothing in higher end restaurants, but like, in Auvergne, France, and did some staging, and like the only American chef they knew was Thomas Keller. That was like even this is like 2006. 2007, and then the only chefs they knew were, it still was like they don't register American. It's like us paying attention to like Swedish basketball players. It's just like the average person doesn't know the NBA outside of basketball players. NBA. That's kind of how European chefs view cooking. Is kind of like nowadays a little bit. Grant Achatz definitely broke through. A few other chefs. We'll call it the post hipster movement has generated its own kind of like its own scene, scene that's deep in that's a new different thing, right, than kind of like the old man stuff we're talking about. Yeah. Now I want to get a little informal. What's your favorite slice in New York?
My favorite slice in New York, I gotta tell you, well, I lived I just moved to Chelsea, which I hope is my last New York City move ever, but then finally moved in, and there's this I don't even know the name of it because I don't even know if it has a name. It's like pizza shop, and he isn't Italian. He's Albanian, like a lot of the slice guys are, even though they try to pretend they're Italian and market themselves Italian. And he's there every day. He owns the shop. You would walk past it, you wouldn't even like glance twice at it.
Well, what's the street?
And it's 16th and 7th.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 7th Avenue and 16th Street. And it's a damn good slice.
Pizza shop in Chelsea.
Yeah, right there on the corner. And he's there every night. He's there during the day. Yesterday when I was walking home, he was like smoking a cigarette outside. And I've been there like 6-7 times now. And he recognized me. Yeah. Meaning like, hey, welcome, it's like, knew that I love the pepperoni slice and I love the Bianca. And I'll only give him a shout out because it's just
proper.
Yeah. It's not any lists. It's not like, there's not some, pseudo Italian American internet celebrity in front of it saying this is like the best slice. It's not some like fresh faced kid from NYU that just got to town who's telling you this is the best slice. It's just like
it's just a great slice.
It's just great. It's classic. It's like no pretense, and it's kind of what it should be. Yeah.
So another question I like to ask people who are creative, and you are a creative person for a living. I'll ask them what they would have done if they hadn't done what they're doing, and I suspect yours would have been a musician.
Oh. Yeah.
You were going to go to Berkeley, right?
Yeah, I was going to Berkeley School of Music, or I guess before, I always kind of played music and loved music. I kind of wanted to be, even though I had bands, whatever, I wanted to be a music producer. and get because I love production also.
What did you play?
Guitar and keyboards, and then when I moved to New York, I fell in love with hip hop and did production for a long time. But I have a studio in my house. I built a $200,000 studio in my house. And I
didn't know that about you.
I don't know if I'm good or not. I just make music for myself. Like I have walls of equipment and everything, and
You've never put anything out, like you don't pass out CDs to people.
No, I don't mix. I don't know.
All right.
No. I just kind of I just do that for myself, really. But before that, I wanted to be. There's two things. I really wanted to be a Formula One pit crew chief. The guys that working the and a marine biologist. But then marine biologist, I think, was just because I just pictured this lifestyle of being on a boat and girls in bikinis and cool fish and I don't know. I think it was more of an aesthetic thing than science. Yeah. So I think that's when I look back at it. That was
sounds
probably
more like a Key West bartender than
it was like I pictured the Jacques Cousteau character, but it was also James Bond, and I didn't know what they did, but it looked
Cousteau and James Bond.
Yeah.
It looked it looked really appealing.
That's easy to do.
It looked really appealing.
Although being the head of a pit crew is almost like I would imagine
that's
running
that's
a
more
kitchen a little bit.
That's chef-like. That sounds chef-like. The marine biologist, not so much.
Well, yeah, and I say Formula One, but it was probably because I grew up, in Ohio. I played sports, but my dad was not a sports dad.
Probably demolition derby is more like.
Yeah, he was he calls it the stick and ball crowd, and he just doesn't care. But we grew up with cars and racing, mostly dirt track racing, and
which looks like a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so much fun.
It looks like a lot of fun. What are the similarities between making food and making music?
Well, the artistic part is, you kind of building a song is the same thing as building a dish or a sauce. It's a similar kind of process, I think, at least for me. I think it's interesting business-wise. I think they're kind of similar. Meaning they're both fucked. You don't have to edit that. There's a lot of similar. You have to, and if you have a band, which you don't necessarily need a band anymore, but if you're playing live, you need to lead in the same way. You kind of deal with those personalities.
Yeah, see, we need more robots.
People have to show up.
Yeah.
To show up for the gig. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's a certain back of the house production, I think, that's very similar to them. Mm-hmm. Meaning to put on the show, it takes. It's never, there's always some chaos involved in putting on the show. I think that way is very similar. Yeah, but the advantage that music has over food is that you can work on a song. You can go in the studio and spend 16 days working on whatever and cut it and it's finished. Mm-hmm. And you can listen to it forever. The disadvantage that we have as chefs running restaurants is that
one shot.
but also the dynamics change, it's a constant dynamic change. The customer changes, the mood changes, the table changes. Table 31, they're having the time of their life. Table 32 hates her guts. And not because of anything you did, because, she brought her mom and she hates her mom. And there's nothing you can do. Everything's going to taste bad or whatever, all those kind of
pasta restaurant.
Yeah, all those kind of the fish comes late. The cook doesn't show up.
All beyond your control.
Yeah, all beyond your control. So that kind of dynamic thing.
The other thing too, though, that I love is that music, there's nothing tangible about it once it's done.
Mm-hmm.
It's that, but food is smell and taste and touch and all these other senses that surround that.
It's only tangible.
But music is in its own place.
Yeah, that's
poetry. Yeah, I like that. That's poetry.
No. Yeah, I never thought about that.
I mean, that's why
I think it's very specific point of view for for you. I think that's something. It's interesting. You're creating something so tangible, and then your other love is something so intangible.
And there's also it's a little masochistic too, right? Because you make your thing, whatever it is, either like make it to give it to some friends and family, meaning like you're like, here's my soup, or like, here's my dubstep, here's my new here's my new beat, and it's like all of a sudden you have to deal with like audience reaction like immediately, so.
That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're putting yourself out there on both of those things.
Yeah.
It's you. I mean, it's you, both things.
That's why I don't put any music out.
As far as we know, you're good at cooking. The music, not who knows? No. It's to be determined.
The basement tapes might come out one day.
You can. I was say you should send me some music. I'll listen to it.
Do you play anything?
No, not at all. I mean, I think saxophone in middle school, but I got made fun of walking home from school for carrying a saxophone. And I
that was it.
I
Crushed
chickened out, man. I was already like, poor kid in a Catholic school, and just like. I just couldn't handle it. I think some older kids just like were just roasting me, and I was like, screw this. I wish I would have stuck with it. I always joke that like when you're in middle school playing the saxophone, you're never gonna get a girl to look at you. If you're 35 and you can like you're wailing on the saxophone, like you can take your pick.
Oh, you don't even have to get that old.
Yeah, it's true. But you know what I'm saying? Like if I was good at the saxophone right now, like oh my God, what a conversation piece.
I feel the saxophone is not in the forefront as it was. Because if you listen to like
That's true. It definitely had its heyday.
If you listen to like any like 1982 to 1989
everyone had a
pop
saxophone
music.
player.
It was sax everywhere.
Everyone.
It was everywhere. There was always some solo or outro or intro or breakdown or whatever.
Even like I'll forget how many songs had a sax. I'll be like listening to a song and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot there's a saxophone solo in this. Yeah, you're totally right.
They don't even have guitar solos anymore.
You don't even need it.
No.
Just give me the saxophone.
Very, very, very. My. We don't have kids, but I do have a lot of nieces and nephews, and my one of my middle nephews, he big hip hop fan. I took him to J. Cole a couple months ago. He freaked out because it was like his first concert and it was a surprise. And anyway, so he was out at my house over the summer, and it was like middle afternoon. I was playing music downstairs. He was bored outside. He came in downstairs, and I wasn't playing any beat-based stuff or electronic-based stuff. I was playing the guitar, and kind of like shredding, And he came down and he sat down and he was like watching me for a little bit, and he said, "Uncle Andrew, can you go play like the drum machine stuff and not play the guitar anymore?"
Totally.
And I felt it was like I felt my grandfather played the saw. Mm-hmm. And it was the worst thing I ever heard in my life. It was like the most sad. It was like the most. It was such a horrible sound, and he used to play it like with the bow and the thing, mm-hmm. and which is amazing because if you try it now, like it's like what an amazing skill. And I felt like that was me, and I was looking at my grandfather playing the saw, and I'm like, that was rough.
That's hilarious. Like, that's rich. Do you have a favorite Detroit band, artist, rapper? Is there anybody that when you think Detroit music, where do you?
I just finished that book on Dilla about basically like how he basically changed time in music, and so he was able to. This is like some pretty geeky stuff, but he was one of the first people to kind of like change time and experiment with changing time. So where you would have like boom bap hip hop before that would be like do do ba do do ba. He would like change those markers at like the bass the bass would hit like not on 2 and 4 but like on 2 and a half. And then it would be like that kind of thing. So it was a whole book on that, and his life also. So, but yeah, I love. It's like a little bit cliche also, but I would say Dilla's probably
I
my
think
favorite.
that's a very quality answer for a hip hop. I'd just say.
Yeah, no, I like the good thing about Detroit is that there's a good cultural base here, and I've made some good friends like outside the restaurant. Kind of circle in Detroit that are, they're more on the artistic scene, which is cool, which I haven't done in other places that we have restaurants, but I have done here.
When you go to a bar and you're I think about this a lot as a chef. Right? When I go to places, I travel a lot, probably not as much as you, but when I go to a new town, Kansas City, you don't know anybody. You go to a place, might be good. I usually order a cocktail just as like a little take the temperature of the restaurant. What is like your go-to cocktail, or a wedding where you don't trust the bartender? Like, what's your go-to drink?
It depends more like what mood I'm in, right?
Sure, but like let's just like generic middle of the day, generic mood. You feel. Are you
talking about like don't look at their list, like order a drink?
Yeah, like you're just gonna be like, I need to test this place. What's
I would drink? I would probably do martini.
This is martini.
Yeah.
You just say martini and let them ask you the questions.
No. Hendrix shaken 3 olives.
Nice.
Extra cold.
That's old school.
There it is.
That's old school. I like it.
Yeah, I like shaken. I know like the bar guys don't like shaken, but I like shaken because I like the little pieces.
Ice crystals.
I like the ice crystals in it. Personally, I like that.
No, I want you to. I want to hear the ice rupture, and I want the crystal. I agree.
Yeah, it's.
And then, what is your? Do you have a favorite champagne? Like it doesn't have to be like vintage crazy. Like,
no,
what's like your go-to champagne?
Yeah, I'm actually not a huge champagne guy.
No.
It's just it's not my. I'm actually. I've had some really good grower champagnes recently, and I would call it like it's like the one French specifically like. I'm not an expert in champagne. I'm not an expert in anything, but I would call it fairly versed in Burgundy and Rhone and Bordeaux. But yeah, champagne. Jacques Sauvois is very nice, but it's impossible to find on a list. And I have a couple bottles at my house, but some places have it. But I'm not. There's like all the cliche answers, which are fine, but I'm not. There's a lot of good grower champagne. Not that I'm not.
I gotcha. It's not your bag.
Yeah.
That's good.
I don't know enough about that grower scene, even though I've had it and been like, oh yeah, that's really good, because I'm just not so interested in champagne as I am like.
And then at your Italian
Barolo
restaurants,
and like.
I would say, you carry more prosecco? Is like, do you guys feature more Italian? For you, it's not prosecco.
I would say sparkling is a funny thing because I tried it for the Italian restaurants. We try to do like all Italian lists for sure. But we always carry champagne because you have to have champagne.
That's the conundrum of Italian restaurants is like all Italian list, except they almost all have champagne because you have to. And
that's okay because when you go to the great restaurants in Italy,
they have champagne.
Like the trip I just went on, we were in Barolo, Barbaresco, and Abruzzo, and we were hosted by 3 of the best winemakers in each region, and we slept at their house. They had dinner or whatever and we all had, every night we had champagne.
Yeah.
And we had great French wine and we had great Italian wine, and kind of they start bringing stuff out of their cellars and their own wines, right. And they start bringing their cellar stuff. So it's not so I necessarily don't believe that if it's naive to say that they only drink Italian wine in Italy,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Or that only region wine, you know what I mean?
It's true.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to add or touch on?
Oh no, that went by fast.
It does. It always goes by fast. That was pretty.
It was.
That was good. That was a great interview. But I feel like funny, serious, cynical, nostalgic. You got all the things.
Our thanks to Chef Andrew Carmellini for joining us. Thanks to you for listening, and
we would like to thank La Marca Prosecco for their support. From the hills of Veneto, Italy, you can never go wrong with Prosecco, whether it's in a spritz or drinking straight.
Essential Cooking is produced by me, Ann Delisi, along with my co-host, James Rigato. This episode was edited, mixed, and mastered by Connor Anderson, with production support from David Lyons, Patrick Burness, and Studios on the Pond. Original music by the Mallet Brothers. Essential Cooking is a production of WDET, Detroit's NPR station.